also part of our reporting team, Ziyanda Ngcobo, who's following the procession as well, just from a different vantage point. And Ziyanda, I've been discussing with Bonga how members of the community have been a part of this, how they've been able to sort of watch from the sidelines, also in some cases, school children sort of walking along. I mean, this is a moment of great pride. It's a moment of recognition. It's a moment of so many things in our culture in this country.
Absolutely, Stephen, and unlike my colleague Bongadlulane, we're at the front of the cortege bound for the KwaKhethomthandayo Palace. You will see the children and families standing on the side of the road, trying to bid farewell, albeit at a distance, to the AmaZulu King. And such is the nature of the COVID-19 pandemic and the conditions under which the AmaZulu King is being laid to rest, where he will be intermented at a ceremony later on this evening. And the palace is quite a distance away, so this is going to take place for quite some time, but I think it was deliberately done in order to allow the community of Nongoma to be able to say goodbye to their AmaZulu King. And in a befitting manner. And I'm going to try and speak to some members of the community about how they feel about their late AmaZulu King. But as we move through the streets of Nongoma, the clouds have gathered, Stephen, and as I was mentioning to you earlier, that this is what usually happens when a member of the royal family is buried, and the belief is that the ancestors of the royal who is being intermented is being blessed and welcomed by their ancestors as soon as the downpours arrive. And so there you have this particular cortege that stretches all the way to where my colleague Bongadlulane is, where you'll be able then to see the community on the sides. They have their phones out, Stephen, and this is the only opportunity they will have to bid farewell to the AmaZulu King. Usually this kind of commemoration would have taken place under the circumstances where you have Amabuto, the Zulu maidens, but also the mothers of the nation really gathering, thousands and thousands gathering. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, such is unable to take place. But at the moment, as you will see, the Amabuto are accompanying the vehicle ferrying the remains of the AmaZulu King, which would usually be done in the traditional way, Stephen. Not as many Amabuto as the AmaZulu nation would have liked to see, but in no uncertain terms, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who is the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu nation, saying that this mourning period should in no uncertain terms be used as a super spreader event at this particular point in time. And so we're going to continue moving through the streets of Nongoma, where, as you can see, the children and the mothers screaming and ululating in anticipation of the king. To my right, Stephen, and you won't be able to see it now though, there is a school where the children are going to be waiting. They're already singing and waving in anticipation of the cortege passing by this particular school. There you see the children and the community, the streets of Nongoma, showing jubilation. It's a celebration in many ways for the AmaZulu nation. The largest ethnic group in the country, Stephen. The ululation from the mothers and the women of this community signify, jubilation, but also a sign of respect, really, for the late AmaZulu King, Stephen.
We can see the children now. We can see the excitement. We can see people sort of being as close to this procession as they could. So many of them, unfortunately, stuck behind that fence there. They're not able to get any closer, but you can see their excitement, Ziyanda, just at being a part of this, just getting to be as close to this as they can. And you can see in so many ways, I think this is a historic moment. In some ways, this is what they're going to remember from this time. They're going to tell their children and their grandchildren that this is what they saw on this day in March 2021. They're going to go all the way back and say, well, when I was young, this is what I saw. This happened, this went past my school, this procession, and this is why it was important, and this is where we were at the time, and this is the pandemic that we were living through at the time. And you can just see the sort of excitement there, and people just trying to be a part of it as well. It really has been an extraordinary procession. It's a fairly long procession as well, Ziyanda. There's a long way to go. You and Bonga have both spoken about the problems relating to the weather and how scary that might be. Of course, at the same time, entirely befitting as well because of tradition. But again, just the huge community involvement in this and the excitement there, Ziyanda, and yet I think the respect that's being shown as well.
Absolutely, Stephen, and you know, we keep talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's significant to speak about this because, you know, usually the send-off of a king, if you think back to 1971, when the father of the now late King Goodwill Zwelithini Kabhekuzulu, the funeral of Cyprian Solomon, that coronation was attended by, that particular send-off rather, was attended by thousands and thousands of congregants and mourners. And it's also important to note, Stephen, that this particular funeral session that's taking place, really the king, this is the only funeral that the king attended. And what I mean by that is tradition says that the AmaZulu king does not attend funerals. So really the only funeral that the AmaZulu king attends is his own. And in this regard, the belief then is that the AmaZulu king does not attend funerals because of the energies around death and bad energies that come with death. That is the belief. And so when you think about today and its significance and how it will be remembered, it will be remembered as a day where the AmaZulu king was laid to rest during a pandemic, but also that his congregants and those who are in the AmaZulu nation were not able to say goodbye in a manner that they usually would have been able to. And as you've mentioned, the children at the school will remember this day differently to how maybe the mother of the mothers of some of these children will remember this day. You'll recall, Stephen, that the AmaZulu monarch is the longest serving monarch of the AmaZulu nation. 50 years would have been marked later on this year. There was going to be a jubilee that was in fact expected to take place at some stage this year to mark 50 years on the throne. But of course it was not to be, and this is also a significant moment as the nation looks forward to seeing and hearing then who the AmaZulu king's successor will be. We heard yesterday from Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi saying that the king's will be read out after the funeral service, but my understanding of tradition and customs is that this may be a couple of months. It could be 3 months, it could be more, depending on how the AmaZulu royal household plans to handle this.
Ziyanda, let's just take a moment and just listen to some of the noises, some of the sounds, some of the children, some of the sirens that are playing out there, and just listen to the actual sounds of what we're seeing. I mean, we can see people trying to jog along now with parts of the procession. We can see as well how it's sort of coming to a stop. But there, that view on the right, if you're watching your television now, you can see how long this procession actually is. Let's just listen to this for a moment.
Hi guys. Hello?
Well, these are live pictures from the procession, paying tribute to King Goodwill Zwelithini Kebeka Zulu, of course, passing through the Nongoma area and just going through there towards his final resting place. And of course, that ceremony will take place later tonight in private, behind closed doors. It has been a remarkable afternoon that you've been watching taking place here. People paying tribute, of course, the Amabuto marching and I suppose walking / marching / paying tribute in their own way, singing through the afternoon. The procession beginning to pick up pace a little bit. We understand that's partly because of concerns over the weather, although tradition also dictates it should rain at a moment like this. So these are the scenes that you're seeing now. We've seen members of the community, school children, people coming out to pay their tributes and their respects to the passing of the monarch. And just the sights and sounds, unique actually in my lifetime and possibly in yours. This is not something that we will see again for many, many years to come.
The community, but it's fine, it's too late because Gift, get in front of the convoy, move. We're getting left behind, move.
At the moment, you can imagine as those vehicles start to move off, it does start to get a lot more complex to try and cover there. But you saw some of the shots earlier showing how long and how big this convoy actually was. And you could see exactly how many people were involved, how big the number of cars was, and of course the community paying tribute there through the afternoon as well. Well, very much that procession, I think, picking up speed now and moving quite quickly through that area there. So that is the situation there at the moment, as people are paying their tribute, of course, to King Goodwill Zwelithini Kebeka Zulu.
Well, Stephen, I don't know if you can hear me, but I can tell you that it is starting to rain as this particular cortege edges closer to the KwaKhethomthandayo Royal Palace. You will notice that the Amabuto are no longer with us. This particular convoy is moving much faster than it did earlier on, and that's because we are gaining some speed as we move to the KwaKhethomthandayo Palace, and the remains of the Amazulu King are bound for the palace, where that private ceremony will be held behind closed doors. We're going to be broadcasting that particular part of the proceedings, but as I already stated, that usually when a royal is actually intermented, the weather does change like this. And as I mentioned, that this the belief is that it's the ancestors who are signaling that this particular ceremony is blessed, but that they are ready to welcome the remains of the late Amazulu King. Stephen.
See, yeah, it does really look like people are getting a move on there. It has also affected the mood, unfortunately. People just, 10, 15 minutes ago were being involved in this. Now, because of the weather, it looks like they may be unable to be involved in it as much as they would have liked.
Well, not particularly. I think it's because we're actually moving at quite a swift pace, and my understanding of the plan was to allow at least the children at the school and the community there to say goodbye. They are standing on the side of the road. The children are saying "Bayede wena wendlovu," which is how you actually you would speak to the Amazulu King, Hlanga lomhlabathi silo samabandla. And so as we've moved through the streets, there's either been ululating from the mothers here, or you know, really giving the clan names as Tuligandaba, saying goodbye, bidding farewell to the Amazulu king. You'll see then that long line of vehicles, Stephen, bound for the KwaKhethomthandayo Palace, and moving at a swift, much more swift pace, but still allowing the communities on my left and on my right, standing on the side of the road, some of them really bending over, which is a sign of respect. There are the mothers lying down, waving, saying goodbye. This is how the Amazulu nation would mourn the life of the now late Amazulu king, Goodwill Zwelithini.
Well, we're seeing this procession moving now as the rain comes down. You heard Ziyanda just discussing that issue, but people still paying their respects there. How heavy is the rain, Ziyanda? We can see it on the camera lens, of course. It seems fairly light at the moment, but the clouds have been getting darker and darker.
Absolutely, Stephen, and as we edge closer, the rain is pouring down heavier and heavier as we edge closer to the KwaKhethomthandayo Palace. And Stephen, I can tell you that please do forgive our shots at this point in time. We are moving at a significant pace, and we're also just trying to follow the manner in which then we are being led by the police, but also the funeral parlor, which are now leading this particular procession. Initially it was Amabuto, but to talk about the rain, it's still it's relatively light, but my understanding and tradition would state is that it was likely to come down much harder, and I can actually tell you, I can feel as we move closer to the palace that the rain is coming down at a more significant, you know, volume as opposed to what it was much earlier on. And this is the signal that a king is being laid to rest today, Stephen. This is a signal that this is just isn't an ordinary human being who is going to be intermented today. And in isiZulu, we don't say that an Amazulu king is buried, because we say uyatshalwa, which if I directly translate this, it means that the king is planted, and the king is planted because the belief is that he's planted because he will rise again. And so earlier on, Stephen, when speaking to Amabuto, they were also really hinting at this particular belief to say that wherever the spirit of the late Amazulu king is right now, they are dealing with the matter tasked with dealing with the succession of the Amazulu nation. And you know, another significant point about the now late Amazulu king is that he was the longest serving Amazulu king, but also he is the first Amazulu king to serve in a democratic state. And there were a lot of negotiations in 1994 about the role of traditional leaders and traditional leadership in this new democratic dispensation that would be established. And you seemingly that the Amazulu king, being one of the few royals who was able then to negotiate for his nation and his people. And here I'm referring to the Nongoma Trust, in which the Amazulu king was the sole trustee of. And this is just one of the legacies that the Amazulu king leaves behind, Stephen. And this is also a signal of, or a marker of just how much the Amazulu king cared for his people, Stephen, and one of the legacies that he leaves behind. So when we talk about the now late Amazulu king, Goodwill Zwelithini, most Amazulu will tell you that he's the only king that they've ever really known. And so this is why today is so significant. No one could have predicted that this would be taking place during a pandemic, in the midst of a global pandemic. And so the circumstances are quite different, but at the same time, you know, the wishes of the late Amazulu king would have dictated that he wouldn't want then his funeral and his memorial service to be used as a super spreader event.
Well, indeed, Ziyanda, and we've seen really people trying very hard to maintain all of those protocols through the afternoon. And of course, from the very beginning of this, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi saying that people mustn't gather in a way which would lead to the spread of COVID-19. We've seen people walking through, marching through that area, singing through that area, wearing face masks and still paying their tribute. Really extraordinary scenes, quite extraordinary actually, what we're seeing there today in this particular time. And as the road turns, as it twists through the real beautiful landscape of that area, you can see how long this procession is. You can see how long it is and how people are actually playing this role at the moment, and how many people are a part of this procession and taking part in what is a historic event at the moment. Ziyanda, at this stage, any idea of how far away it is, how much further this procession has to go? I know that can be quite difficult to say from where you are at the moment.
Well, Stephen, I can tell you that we're not far away, actually, from the palace. I'd say we should be there, depending on the pace at which we're moving at, we should be there in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But to my right, Azvi is going to show you the palace, albeit at a large distance. There are tents that have been erected. There are taxis, the taxis that we're ferrying, Amabuto, and they, on the other side, Stephen, are waiting for the remains of the king to arrive. So this is where we are right now. We are passing the church here in Nongoma, one of the churches here, and we know that the late king was actually an Anglican, and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi telling us yesterday that the arrangements have been so difficult under the COVID-19 pandemic, such that even trying to get Archbishop Thabo Makgoba to KwaNongoma were quite a tricky situation in terms of getting him here. And the numbers for the COVID-19 pandemic. We are now passing Mlogotwa High School. We are not far away. There are more children to my left who are waving, trying to say goodbye to their king. And slowing down is this particular procession to allow for those who are standing by to actually say goodbye to the late Amazulu king, someone who grew up here, in particular, Stephen, at the KwaKhethomthandayo Palace, which is where we are headed at the moment. This particular palace is where the late king's father, Cyprian Kasolomon, was actually lived, and this is where the late Amazulu king grew up. He attended a school not far from where we are, and this is the life of the late Amazulu king, which was unique in the sense that he had modern education and schooling, but also rooted in his Zulu traditional customs and